Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the People's Bills podcast. It's the Cover One Roundup here, live on the Cover One YouTube channel each and every Monday night at 7 p.m. Again, on the Cover One YouTube channel or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week by Cover One writer David Fox, probably co-host, probably Cover One title host / co-host.
I don't think I've ever had an official title here. Like I'm not like lead correspondent or co-correspondent. I'm just like I'm a dude that writes, and every once in a while I get on here and spiel about random crap about the Bills.
I can get you a title. I can just make one. It wouldn't be official or anything, but
I mean, technically, you are my editor for the articles,
right? And that I edit.
So you are my my superior in that sense.
Speaking of which, Cover One is looking for another writer because I retired. I formally retired from writing. So if you want to replace me, you could apply. It's on Twitter. You could send your resume, I guess. So what are we going to be doing today here on the Cover One Roundup? Jason Taylor writes, official title, The Other Guy. That's my title. That's my title. So now, David, you're the other guy.
There we go. The other guy.
We're still operating as though Rob is still on this podcast. That's just ever waiting the return of Rob, and then we'll see what happens. But so today on the Cover One Roundup, we are going to be going through each of the Buffalo Bills position groups and determining what the position group ceiling is and also what its floor is, which is pretty self-explanatory. I think you could pretty much gather that from the headline of what we're doing today. So
if you need a further explanation on what that means, honestly, I don't really know what to tell you.
Right. So buildings. There are ceilings that's above you, and then below you is the floor. But how it works is some ceilings are also floors. If you think
I was just gonna say, like, what if the ceiling is the floor?
Right. The standard is the standard.
That's right.
So we'll be doing that momentarily. But before that, I have an announcement, I guess, for next week. Next week's Cover One Roundup. We have a fun show planned. And also the Roundup, because a few things happened in Buffalo Bills land today. So we will be discussing those things here momentarily. But before we do that, let me quickly preview what next week's show is, David. It was your idea, so I'll throw it to you. What are we doing next week?
So next week, because it's the off season, and unlike today, basically nothing really happens. I thought it would be a great idea for us to basically torture ourselves and go back to the drought era Bills and just sort of think about and pontificate about how unbelievably bad that 15-year span of Buffalo Bills history was, because we sit here in our nice podcast talking about the betting favorite for the Super Bowl, Buffalo Bills, and I think it's sometimes hard to remember, this team used to be atrocious, a genuine awful train wreck, a total mess from top down. And since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have come on, here we are. You want to live that era again? I don't want to live that era, but I think it's important to remember the past so that we can appreciate what we have now.
Right. We're not erasing the past.
That's right. We gotta sit here and talk about your Greg Williamses, your Mike Mularkey's and his bizarre, still unknown reasons for resigning. Do we actually?
We'll have him on next week.
We'll have him on next week. We'll have him talk about that. Dick Geron, the KG sunglasses at night, Dick Geron, Jan Gailey, the Duggernaut, and of course, who can forget Rex frickin' Ryan? They went through a number of coaches. They went through even more quarterbacks, and it's good to look back and see how we ended up where we are now. And we hope to have some other guests on here, hopefully from the other areas of Cover One. So I am looking forward to next week because I love going back and just absolutely shitting on bad football teams.
Simply put, we've had it too easy. We've had it too easy on this podcast. We get to talk about Josh
We get
Allen
to talk
every
about
week.
like good teams, which like I don't know about you, but it's very unusual. Like it's weird to just sit here and be like, oh yeah, this team is like amazing. We expect double-digit wins with double-digit like point differential every week, like obviously, and it's just like we were lucky if we won on a last-second Ryan Lindell field goal most weeks. Like, let's be honest, we were looking forward to Brian Mormon punts.
He was one of the that's the hallmark of me of those old Bills teams, like the majority of those Bills drought teams, because I was a child through most of the drought, right? I was you were as well, but like that's how I knew the Bills were a really good football team, is that the highest rated players on Madden every year were Ryan Lindell and Brian Mormon. So you knew that the Bills were a quality football team when their top players were the kicker and the punter. So like I said, we've had it too easy. So we're going to look back on that beautiful 17-year stretch next year, or next week. Ooh, next year, geez. No, next week we're going to do that. Go over our favorite moments, our favorite players, memorable games, things like that. And like David said, hopefully have some Cover One personalities on next week. Aaron Quinn mentioned that he might stop by. He might have just been joking, though. I don't know.
I don't think he was, and I hope that he does, based on what he said.
I hope he does. He always has claimed to like me, but he's never been on the podcast. So I mean,
that's a good point.
He's never put his money where his mouth is.
How many other people have been on this podcast? How many other Cover One people have been? I know Mike filled in for you one week.
Kevin and Anthony were on the mock draft, and Greg was on a couple of the early episodes.
Okay.
He had to give us that ratings bump, but now we're beyond savings, so he doesn't he doesn't hop on anymore. But I did get a guest for next week. I widened our horizons a bit. I brought in a guest, confirmed, and by confirmed I mean she agreed to do it. Victoria from the Tuck Rule podcast is going to be on next week, bringing in the big guns to talk about the Buffalo Bills playoff drought, which we're all very well versed in, but she has a deep understanding of bad football and the Buffalo Bills playoff drought. So if you aren't listening to the Tuck Rule, which is the podcast she does, that's your bad. It's a great podcast. So go listen to that. Catch up before next week when she will be on to discuss all of the Buffalo Bills playoff drought. So before we get into the ceilings and floors of each Buffalo Bills position group for this year, right, about the good football team, we are going to talk about the Roundup. And that's the segment where we talk about the latest Buffalo Bills news, rumors, and other things in a Roundup fashion. So minicamp started today, I believe. I don't know if like the actual practices started today, but media day was today, according to Von Miller, saying, hey, it's my first media day in Buffalo. And then he smiled or whatever. How many damn videos has Von Miller made saying he's excited to be a Bill?
About as many videos as people have made about James Cook not being excited about being a Bill.
Right, they're feuding at this point. Like Von Miller's
clearly.
It's incredible. I'm so glad that got put to bed. Was it last? Has this just happened?
Has it been put to bed? Has it been put to bed? There's some people who are just going to forever like believe that James Cook doesn't want to be here.
Well, as someone who also has resting bitch face, I feel the pain of James Cook just being James Cook, and people are like, why are you in a bad mood? And it's like, I'm not. I just look like this. Like that is what James Cook is facing on a huge scale right now, and I feel bad for him.
It's like that Seinfeld bit where where George is like, you don't need to like, in order to look busy, you just need to look annoyed. And you just like, And they're like, oh, yeah, he does look very busy. He does look busy.
James Cook, busy guy. He's just so busy.
That's right.
He doesn't
have
time to play football for the Buffalo Bills. He's got all these other things.
That man was a national champion this past year. I mean, he had to play 13, 14 games in college football. Then he had to go into the draft cycle. He had to go, get a camera shoved in his face to show just how unhappy he was when he got drafted. And now he's in minicamp. The man's a busy man.
You just got to eat chicken wings, right? Got to eat team-sponsored chicken wings. Lenova's not bad, but also there are better wings that a dude could eat. But
I truly cannot comment on the actual Buffalo City wing scene because
you gotta come up.
God, when was the last time I was actually in Buffalo? It's a long time ago. And I was probably visiting family and probably not for very long. I saw, the prison closes early, so.
I saw John Mulaney last week, and he opened with, don't cancel me. I just saw John Mulaney. He opened with, it's been a long time since I've been in Buffalo, and now that I'm back, I can see why it's been a long time. And I was just like, that's a hell of a way to open up to a crowd of people.
That's the low-hanging fruit you're looking for. Right?
Yeah, that's a hell of a way to open up to any city, let alone Buffalo, New York. Be like, hey, this city sucks. Awesome. So minicamp started today to get back on track. And guess who was there, David?
You? Were you there? Are you trying out?
No.
Okay.
Well,
now I have no idea.
I didn't make it through the post-draft one where they invite all the players. And, I think a fullback got signed 1 year. But, I got cut after that. But Jordan Poyer was reportedly there today. It wasn't even a contract holdout. It was like him just wanting a new contract, and he didn't go to the voluntary workouts, but he's showing up to mandatory workouts. So this is a non-story, but I feel like we have to talk about it, right? Jordan Poyer wants a new contract still, but he's doing what his current contract mandates him to do.
Yeah, it's the only way previously to really have any leverage over a team in contract disputes was, holding out of training camp. And if you really had to, then holding out during the regular season. That got very quickly erased when the CBA basically said, hey, if you miss, a day of training camp, you get fined, what is it, $10,000 for each day that you miss or something like that? It's a lot of money every day. I think the last time there was legitimate holdout that I can remember, and maybe it was two of them. I think they were both on the charges. It was Vincent Jackson, and this was a while ago. Vincent Jackson, and who was that big left tackle that they had? Marcus McNeil. Am I remembering that correctly?
I did. Maybe.
I'm gonna have my
sounds like it. Jamie,
pull that up. Fact check that. Oh, look at that, Marcus McNeil. Look at that.
Good shot. That's a good pull.
It is a good pull. Good job.
I just made a Joe Rogan reference. So that's the second time in 13 minutes that I've said a cancelable thing, but whatever. We move on. We move forward. But so Jordan Poyer's at minicamp. I guess that's really the only.
And like we said before, when this whole thing started, the whole thing really started when he decided to change agents to Drew Rosenhaus, and like we said, when that happened, you don't hire Drew Rosenhaus to keep your current contract. Drew Rosenhaus wants the money. He is going to get you the money. He's going to get himself a lot of money, as he's done throughout his whole career as an agent. So we'll ultimately see what happens, but it is weird to say it because it is a story, but it really isn't a story because unless he takes a very bold step and decides to actually hold out and get fined $10,000 a day doing it, he's going to show up and he's going to have to do what he needs to do.
Right. He just strikes me as the type of guy too, who wants to be there, wants to lead the team. He wants to get paid. Obviously a player of his caliber in the last year of his contract should want to get an extension. I think he wants to retire a bill as well. I think he said that.
But what does Rachel Bush want?
I guess, right?
She wants the bag, and no, I can't blame her.
But he deserves it. But it's a matter of now he's going to be there to lead by example. And I think that will probably, that would, I think, compel Brandon Beane to extend him more so than him holding out Woods. So the next order of business here in the Roundup has to do with a Dutch name, Greg Van Roten or Greg Van Roten. How are we pronouncing that? Is it going to depend on his play? If he's Van Roten or Van Rotten, it'll depend on how he plays in the preseason. But the Buffalo Bills signed him today.
They did. They improved their depth, which is a nice way of saying he kind of sucks. But he's fine. He got a semi decent contract when he was with the Jets. Probably certainly more than what he deserved coming out of Carolina. He is a perfectly adequate depth player. And there is nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of teams that would love to have Greg Van Roten / Rotten as their like backup guard. And it's another piece of the puzzle when you look at the interior offensive line between him, Cody Ford, Rick Bates, Greg Mance, some other people I'm probably forgetting. Roger Saff. I mean, we know Roger Saff holds
right.
At least set to start.
Depth, but
but everything else is kind of like we'll see. So it's a good signing, and probably for I didn't see any numbers. I assume
it's like probably
1 year
league minimum, close to league minimum. 697 snaps at right guard for the Jets last year. PFF graded him 68.1 overall grade, 53.7 pass block, 75.0 run block. So it depends on the day of the week whether if Bills Mafia likes PFF grades or not. But if you like PFF grades, there you have it. There are his PFF grades, and he's a former Toronto Argonaut, so it's a bit of a homecoming here.
I didn't know that.
Me neither until I looked it up. I watched this is a tangent, and then we're getting into ceiling sports, I swear. But David, have you ever just encountered like a book or a movie that you attempted to read or watch like a bunch of times and it just never clicked, and then one time you pick it up and it just clicks for you and you go through it and you love it?
No.
The example is.
I would like to. I like to think that I have pretty discerning taste, or at least I understand the taste that I have. Where it's like, if I don't like this book, I'm still gonna finish it because I paid money for it.
Oh, I don't do that.
But that doesn't mean I have to like it.
I have DNF'd so many books and movies, but the example I was trying to make was I watched CFL football last week. I've tried to get into the CFL so many times. As a football fan, you got to get into CFL football. You have to watch it at least once. In my case, I've tried to watch it for like the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. I watched it last week. It's electric. I am all the way in on CFL football right now. Ottawa Red Blacks. The Ottawa Red Blacks have flannel collars.
Really?
Yes.
God, that is so Canadian. I love it.
And their name is the Red Blacks. I don't know what that means, what a Red Black is, but they also have a French name, and it's the Rouge et Noir. So why in French they are red and black, but in English they're Red Blacks? It doesn't make any sense, but their quarterback is really good. And also I was watching the game, and it was 10-10, and then they punted, and then it was 11-10, and I don't understand how Canadian football works.
I think that's the thing that has like kept me from getting into the CFL in particular is like ever since that one clip got shown on like the Sports Center top 10 of that ending between the like the Argonauts and the Alouettes, I think, if I remember
that is
correctly.
a team.
Yeah. Where like they lined up for a field goal, it came up short, and then they had to like kick it out of the end zone, and then they had to like kick it back into the end zone. But it was like a drop kick for each one, and then like they like soccer kicked it when it was on the ground, and then somebody recovered it in the end zone. That was a touchdown. I was like, what? Who keeps track of this, and who thought of this? And like, what is this absolute chaos? Who is okay with
what this? What is this joke of the game? It's Canadian football, baby.
It was hilarious. Oh my gosh! All right. keep talking. I'm gonna look up that clip now.
No, it's just Canadian football is incredible. And also, I watched another game, the BC Lions. They had a whole ass One Republic concert before their show, or before their game, just a whole concert. It was like, I would not be surprised if some people just went because it was a concert and then left before the football game. That's how long this damn show was, this concert.
Wow.
But yeah, Canadian football, it's electric. That's all I really have to say about that. So moving on, I think we're getting into the ceiling and floor of each Buffalo Bills position group. As I said, it's pretty self-explanatory what we're going to be doing. So let's just start with the quarterback position, because that is probably the most notable position in all of sports, certainly on this Buffalo Bills roster, because they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. Their quarterback depth chart shakes out as Josh Allen, and then Case Keenum, and then Matt Barkley. So, David, I don't think we're really going to be shocking many people here with this analysis. So we'll keep this relatively quick so we get into some of our more, I don't know, controversial takes, if you will. Probably not that controversial. But so, David, to you, what is the ceiling of this quarterback group?
Josh Allen is MVP and no one else plays.
Mm-hmm.
or that, he performs so well in like the first three quarters that they pull him sometimes in the fourth quarter. And, just like have your mega baller quarterback be a mega baller. Like that's the ceiling. That's what you want to see.
Right, that's what I wrote down. Josh Allen is MVP, All-Pro, Pro Bowler, all of the accolades. Like that is the type. I mean, we talked about this. I think it was last week when I think I had a bold prediction of Josh Allen wins MVP. He is in a position here. He has been well surrounded to the point where he could realistically win MVP with the surrounding cast he has and just the type of player he is. He looks, at least, to be in a very good position to win that award. And then for the floor, I don't think either of us think this is going to happen. I think we both think that the ceiling is much more likely to be reached than the floor, but the floor isn't too low. If you remember back to 2018, 2019, Josh Allen wasn't good, but Josh Allen was this freak athlete who was keeping the Bills in games with really no surrounding cast, really no support around him. So I'm not saying this is going to happen. I am right now saying this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. But in the event where Josh Allen does regress to 2019 Josh Allen, the Bills will still be a competitive team, just because even at his floor, at Josh Allen's floor, he was still keeping the Bills in games. He was still winning them 6 games on what should have been a 2-win roster in 2018. He won them 10 games in 2019 on that really wasn't a 10-win team. It shouldn't have been. So at his floor, Josh Allen is still a competent quarterback who can keep you in games. But again, I think we both think Josh Allen is more likely to reach the ceiling this year than he is the floor.
Yeah, I agree.
JA MVP, 5,000 yards, throwing 100 touchdowns. That's a hell of a ceiling.
I mean, we're not saying it. The people are saying it. We are not saying it.
And this is the People's Bills podcast. We let the people say what they want to say here.
That's right.
Moving on to the running back position. Yeah, that wraps up quarterback, right? The ceiling is.
What do you want to say? Like, we already said it. We're good.
Running back. This is an interesting one. Is it? Kind of. So, I think we're looking at a 3-man rotation. If you want to count Josh Allen as part of the rotation, like I think. The ceiling is, let's go player by player here. Devin Singletary, I think we both agree, is going to be the lead back, be the 1A, and what will largely be a running back by committee situation. I want to say his ceiling is 1,000 yards on the ground, just because he is going to be asked to just be the running back, because they did bring James Cook in to be the receiving back. So I don't think Devin Singletary is going to be counted on as much, if at all, in the passing game. So he is just going to be focused on as that lead back on the ground. But I can't get to 1,000 yards as the ceiling. I just don't think that's really that realistic of a benchmark. I will go like 9.
So to be clear, 1,000 rushing yards over the course of a 17-game season is just under 59 yards per game.
I don't know if I can.
I'm not sure if I
don't
agree
know.
with it either. I'm not sure it's going to happen either. But I do think what you alluded to, right? It's like part of what's going to factor into this is how much Ken Dorsey really wants to run the ball with Josh Allen in particular. Now, Josh Allen really was mainly used on like short yardage and goal line situations, which like you're 6'5", 250, that's what you should be used in. But there's also times where they would use him as like on a first down run as a tendency breaker, or in second down situations or whatever. It was rare, more rare than the other situations, but I think that it's going to depend on how much Ken Dorsey, who has worked with obviously Josh Allen for the last couple of years, but also previously Cam Newton, very similar. If there was another quarterback similar to Josh Allen, physically speaking, it was Cam Newton. I just wonder how much they will do designed runs in particular with Josh Allen, because like Josh Allen is just going to run sometimes, on a broken play, like that's what you want. And like I don't think that they're telling him, hey, don't run, or don't just throw it away or whatever. It's like you don't want to take away something that is a part of him and part of his game, but you also don't want him to take a billion hits. You prefer him to take a little less than a billion hits. So I think if there is more emphasis on running the ball with their running backs, and Devin Singletary picks up where he left off, and this offensive line improves the way that we think it should. I feel like I'm making a lot of qualifications right now, but that's what we do. But yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible. And I think the other major aspect to this is not James Cook, because I think we all feel like James Cook is going to be more of a receiving back than anything else. It's really going to be if Zach Moss can do anything, really, because he really didn't do much of anything last year. And that's where like they really ran into a problem in the run game, when like they couldn't really get anything going with Singletary, and then they turned to Moss, and he was just like worse somehow. And thank God that Singletary actually found some space and some more confidence later in the season. But I think that 1,000 yards is a good ceiling to have. It might be slightly
it's a high ceiling, but
I think it's a reasonable ceiling to have. Even in this offense, which is for the last pretty much since Josh Allen has been here, a very pass-heavy offense. But we shall see. I will maintain that 1,000 yards is a lofty ceiling, but not completely out of the picture.
Right. That's the only reason why I'm more realistically willing to put it at like 900 or 950. I mean, it's only that's like a game difference, but it's just like, given how pass heavy of an offense they are, or how they have been in the past and likely will continue to be, it's just it's difficult to imagine Devin Singletary getting to 1,000 yards for me. I don't know.
He finished last year. He finished last year with 870.
Yeah. You look at the trajectory, 775 down to 687 to 870, and 870 is only with like a handful of good games for the most part. So it's just kind of like consistent mediocrity, and then kind of putting them together there near the end of the year, kind of stacking weeks. But with James Cook again, and with Josh Allen and how we figure that he's going to run the ball, I don't know if Devin Singletary is going to get the opportunities really to get to 1,000 yards. But I will put the ceiling at 1,000 yards, just because, I mean, that's really, I guess, what any lead back tries to aim for at the start of the season. All right. Well, that's kind of the benchmark. But so the ceiling is 1,000 yards. What is the floor for Singletary? Like 7 or 8, probably, where he's been around his entire career for the most part.
I'd probably say closer to like 5 or 6.
Really?
I think that's the floor. And part of that, I am taking into account, like, if Devin Singletary is only rushing for 500 rushing yards, it probably means that somebody else is also running well, like better than what he is, whether that's Zach Moss or maybe James Cook is better than they anticipated. That's sort of what I think. I think it's certainly possible that Singletary just kind of sucks and the run game sucks as a whole again. But I think it's possible that they feel comfortable enough with Zach Moss and or James Cook where, like, when they give them the ball, that they get consistent yards and they don't feel the need to just wear out Singletary in the run game completely.
I'm going to transition here to Zach Moss before we get to James Cook, because I feel like there's more discussion to be had about James Cook than there is about Zach Moss. But for Zach Moss, the floor is off the roster / week-to-week inactive. I mean, there is a very realistic possibility that, Zach Moss was week-to-week inactive last year for a stretch of the season. So it's and now they brought in James Cook. So there is, it's quite easy to imagine scenarios in which Zach Moss is not a weekly active player here. For ceiling, like I understand the Zach Moss truthers, and there are more Zach Moss truthers than I'd imagine there would be. Which there aren't a lot, but there are more. Given based off what we've seen from Zach Moss, there are more Zach Moss truthers than I'd imagine. But there are a lot of people who make reasonable arguments of he looked okay in his rookie year, and then 2021 he's coming off that injury. So there are excuses to be made for his lack of development last year. So now that he's had a full offseason healthy, maybe he is able to come back and put it all together. But I just have not seen enough from Zach Moss to forecast that leap. So for ceiling, situational running back, situational power back, I guess, when you don't want to use Josh Allen in those short yardage situations. I don't know why you wouldn't want to use Josh Allen in those short yardage situations, but for me, the ceiling for Zach Moss is quite low, just because I haven't really seen enough from Zach Moss recently in order to anticipate him taking that step.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I say this as somebody who really liked Zach Moss when he came out, and really liked a lot of what he did in his rookie season. But it was pretty bad last year. Like, genuinely, just like, it felt like every time he got the ball, it was just a wasted play. It was rough watching that throughout that whole season, but you never know what's really going to happen. You don't know if, like, a scheme change like they're planning on doing with Cromer and Dorsey is going to help him. And it honestly might just be where this room is so crowded and he doesn't really offer what they are looking for, and they just cut him. Which is fine. But I also think that some of the comments from Brandon Beane regarding a different player that I'm sure we'll get to later, when he talked about Cody Ford earlier this offseason, he talked about, wanting to be patient with him because they weren't patient with Wyatt Teller, and Wyatt Teller ends up being this, Pro Bowl, all-pro type of player for Cleveland. So I think that they just want to, they look at this just like, what's the downside of keeping Zach Moss on the roster for now? Like, we're not paying him a ton of money. He is young, and we still believe in our scouting reports for him. Like, it's just a matter of figuring out how best to use him, and hopefully he takes in the coaching that he needs. The issue is just going to be, does that all come together? And I think the main way he gets forced out is just if he has an atrocious camp and they feel like somebody like Duke Johnson can offer more than he can, which would be pretty telling at this point, to be honest.
It would be quite telling. If you guys want a number on it, which I mean, yeah, I could see why you'd want a number on it. Zach Moss's career, 2020, he had 481 rushing yards. Last year, 345. I would say that the ceiling this year, again, sad, unfortunate, given that he's a third-year running back who a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for. Given the situation and given what we've seen from Zach Moss, I think the ceiling is like 300 to 400 rushing yards. I would like to be proven wrong. It's going to be interesting if I'm proven wrong. If he has more yards than that, I want to know what the hell happened. what sequence of events led to that happening?
Right,
that'll be an interesting timeline to live in. But let's focus in on James Cook here and then move on because we're 35 minutes in. This is interesting because I would say not only is it possible, maybe likely that he finishes with more receiving yards than he does rushing yards, just because I think we envision scenarios, again, as we've talked about, we envision scenarios where Singletary is the guy who they lean on when they want to run the ball, and then Cook comes in on passing down. Sometimes maybe he's even lined up in the slot a little bit. So I would say peak ceiling for James Cook, we're looking at like 700 to 800 total yards, maybe like what, 400 or 500 receiving and then the rest rushing, which I mean, I would say that's a very good season from James Cook.
Extremely good season.
Right. If you get like 750 total yards out of James Cook in his rookie year, I'm more than happy with that. That's an incredible rookie year.
And especially when a lot of that will come in the passing game. I'm very intrigued by that. I mean, we mentioned this last week or maybe the week before. No, it was last week. Where, you know, my bold prediction was James Cook has over 500 yards receiving, and the last Bills running back to do that was Fred Jackson. Since we're bringing back the drought era. But yeah, I like the Bills' confidence in James Cook early on because it seems like they really, really like him. And I hope that translates well. I think that if the ceiling of like 750-ish all-purpose yards, I think that's appropriate for James Cook. So then the floor would be what, less than like 500 yards total?
Yeah, I had like 400 total.
Yeah.
If he's coming in, again, that wouldn't be bad. It would just be underwhelming. If he comes out with 200 total rushing yards and then like 200 in the receiving game, that's just like, oh, well, we kind of oversold what we thought your role was going to be, which, I mean, that's more on us than it would be on James Cook. But but I really don't see that happening. I do think he's going to have a bigger role. Just again, as we've said on this podcast, given how they attacked that role this year, given how they pursued J.D. McKissick and then got the insurance policy and then got James Cook on top of all of it, I think
they clearly think that this is an area of need and something that will improve the overall efficiency of the offense, because that's really what it comes down to, right? And we kind of talked about it before a couple of weeks ago with, like, you know, having a good receiving back does not mean that they're going to be catching, you know, slants and posts or anything like that. What it means is when you get that swing pass, you're not getting negative yardage or 0 yards or 2 yards. You're getting like 4 yards or 5 yards or maybe even a first down off of that. And that's what keeps your offense clicking and moving and in rhythm, and it allows your coordinator to be like, all right, we're in sequence, we can stay calm, we can steady on, we're good to go, instead of being like, well, crap, that was a waste of a play, or, you know, great, we're in second and long and we gotta take care of this now, and blah blah blah, you know. And I think that's where a lot of, not a lot of, but it was part of the issues for a Bills offense last year that was so reliant on big plays.
I saw a TikTok earlier about James
Lafayette Pitts.
No, I did make a Lafayette Pitts TikTok, and I misspelled lonely. I misspelled the word lonely.
I should have noticed that.
Yeah, I did. I didn't notice it until hours later, and I was like, damn, I can't fix that. But so I saw a TikTok. This guy was essentially saying that James Cook is overrated and overhyped. And he was like, he's a sub 200-pound running back who is just like, you know, he's going to be James White. And it's like, well, okay, one, he was like 190 and he just ate Lenovo, so he's pushing 200 now. And two, if he's James White, that's awesome. Like,
yeah,
James
like
White
what
is
are
sick.
we talking about? Like, listen. If you go through my Twitter and search at GFoxy James White, you will see just multiple tweets all saying basically the same thing, which is that James White has the most insignificant skill set of any running back in the history of the NFL. And what I mean by that is, like, physically, what does he bring to the table? Basically nothing. He's not super agile. He's not fast. He's not big. He's not strong. And yet he is the most aggravating and annoying running back that the Patriots have had, like, maybe ever. Like, in that Brady era, where it was just like, yeah, I'll just dump it to James White and he'll get 6 yards. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could have the perfect coverage for everything that those stupid Patriots teams would do downfield, and then Brady was like, whatever, James White, 6 yards, easy. Yeah. And it's just like, that's what you're looking for. Like, what are we talking about here? Oh, James White, he's just James White. Good.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's like, we wanted James White. We had James when we did our free agent big board. We had James White like kind of grossly high, to be honest. So we really wanted James White, which
I'm still shocked that, like, in the time that Brady has been in Tampa, that they never made an offer to get James White away from New England.
Hey, maybe Brady knows something we don't. I doubt it, though. Tom Brady, not known for being an overly intelligent person. So yeah, just to wrap it up here, ceiling for the running backs. You know that the Bills were they were 6th in rushing yards last year. Most of that's with Josh Allen, but they were not most of it, but you know what I mean. They were 6th in rushing. That's crazy. For ceiling, I have like Bills near 10 in rushing, maybe, you know, in that 8 to 12 range in rushing, and then floor
top 10 rushing team.
Right. Floor obviously could be lower. But with Josh Allen, again, Josh Allen's going to run the ball, even if they don't do as many designed runs with Josh Allen, which is a possibility. But even, you know, Josh Allen's going to get 4 to 5 just on broken plays and things like that, I'm sure. So, you know, he will have them pushing top 10. Just if you're getting 500 rushing yards from your quarterback, you are in position to be a top 10 rushing team. So the Bills will be near there statistically in rushing. So that's kind of all I need to know about that. Moving on to receiving, this is potentially where my hottest take is, or hottest analysis is, in terms of the ceiling. For me, the ceiling is the Bills have 2 1,000-yard receivers. David, do you know when the last time the Bills had 2 1,000-yard receivers was? And chat, you can play this game as well.
Was it, if I say never, would I be correct?
No, they've had it at least once, at least in this 1 year that I found.
Was it? I feel like this was probably Andre Reed and James Lofton.
No, they've had it since then.
Okay. Was this an Eric Moulds year?
The people got it. Eric Moulds.
Price. I didn't think Peerless Price got 1,000 yards.
He did in at least 2002. Your boy Lettuce coming in clutch with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Shakir's 80 yards from scrimmage versus Miami is more than Hill gets on this. Hey, no, I don't know if you've heard this, your boy Lettuce, but Tyreek Hill is going to be even better now because Tua is so much more accurate than
he does so many things better than Patrick.
I don't know what Stockholm syndrome is, but I think Tyreek Hill has it. I think that's a possibility.
Tyreek, have you ever heard of Stockholm syndrome? Is that something that Tua does? Because if not, then I don't care.
That's good. That could happen. Everyone got it. Everyone got Moulds.
Everyone got it but me. Apparently, I'm the one who brought up the drought era.
I would not have gotten Peerless Price. I was a child. Like I liked Peerless Price, but you know, I didn't. I when I was I would have been 5 years old in 2002. I didn't care that Peerless Price and Eric Moulds were going to get.
I was 7, and I did not watch football when I was 7 years old. For me, that is the ceiling. Is you do get 2 1,000-yard receivers in this receiving core. People in the chat are kind of debating about who that would be, who those 1,000-yard receivers are going to be. I'm gonna go with the 1-2. I'm going Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. Now that's crazy. You're like, Kyle, 2 outside receivers getting 1,000 yards. That's crazy. Gabe Davis to me is just kind of this
we know how good Gabe Davis has been these past 2 years. Again, as I said last week, kind of in limited roles for the most part. We know how impactful he's been. I think he's just kind of this sleeping giant. And now that he's not going to be forced to platoon with a John Brown or an Emmanuel Sanders, he is just the number 2 receiver. I think we are going to see a side of Gabe Davis that we haven't seen before. I think we're going to see a player that a lot of people aren't expecting to see. Again, I said last week he was going to lead the team in touchdowns next year. I think that there's a realistic possibility he gets over 1,000.
Remember when Robert Foster was the thing?
When we were pretending he was the number 1 receiver. That was really fun. No, I think there's a distinct possibility that Gabriel Davis, his ceiling, let's focus in on Gabe Davis. His ceiling is 1,000 yards and like 8 or 9 touchdowns, maybe 10 touchdowns. His floor, I think, is like 700 yards and like 7 touchdowns. I think as a floor, he's still a very good number 2 wide receiver, still an incredible number 2 wide receiver. But his ceiling, he's going to be like, we're going to have contract discussions about Gabe Davis next year if he has the type of year that I think he's going to have. And then Stephon Diggs, again, floor and ceiling, both over 1,000 yards, both over 100 receptions, probably.
Like, I feel like there were people who were like slightly disappointed at times with Stephon Diggs's production. But like, there's like a difference between what he did in 2020, which was just like absolute domination pretty much every week, versus what he did in 2021, which was like Pro Bowl level, genuinely number 1 type receiver, just not like, wrecking literally everyone's game plan on a weekly basis. That does not mean that he regressed. It does not mean that he is a bad player. All it means is just like, hey, some teams kind of adjusted for how much Josh Allen likes throwing to Stephon Diggs. And in spite of that, he still had over 1,000 yards and 7, 8 touchdowns? Something like
8,
that?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Stephon Diggs is who we think he is. And that's a damn good receiver.
Right. Yeah. Again, his ceiling and his floor. His ceiling, I think he had like 1,500 yards his first year. I don't think he's gonna, lead the league in receiving and be again. That was just an insane season we saw from Stephon Diggs in 2020. But again, 1,300 yards is a ceiling, over 100 receptions, and then I guess floor would be like just barely usurping 1,000 yards. But I think worst case scenario, even Stephon Diggs is north of 90 receptions with 1,000 yards. With Jamison Crowder, to me, the ceiling is, just to get to, further down here on the depth chart. Jamison Crowder, I think the ceiling is like 700 to 800 yards. I could see someone making the argument for like 900 yards because that's what Cole Beasley had in his best season with Josh Allen. And that's kind of the comp being used for Jamison Crowder, and rightfully so, given just the position and skill set, or different skill sets, but the role in which he figures to have in the offense. But I again, just with Gabe Davis, again, you guys know that I'm very strongly anticipating a big year from Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. I don't know if Jamison Crowder, I don't know if there are enough reps to get Jamison Crowder north of 1,000 receiving yards. So, but 700 to 800 receiving yards for Jamison Crowder is still a very strong year. And then again, a lot of people aren't going to like this. I think the ceiling for guys like Isaiah McKenzie and even Khalil Shakir, I think their ceiling is that they're impactful in limited roles, right? They're limited gadget guys who get a couple of plays here and there, and they make the most of them. Mike Clay put out his season projections today, where he like goes through and projects stats, which are, they're useful, but he projected Khalil Shakir to have 6 offensive touches next year. I think that's a little low. I think 6 offensive touches for Khalil Shakir.
6 touches?
Right. Two rushes. Yeah, 2 rushes, 4 receptions he had for Khalil Shakir. I think that's a little low. I think he's going to be more involved in the offense than that, but I don't know.
I would hope so.
Right, I would hope so as well, just given what we know of Khalil Shakir, his game. But I don't think he's taking over in the slot for Jamison Crowder or then Isaiah McKenzie. He'd have to usurp 2 people to get to that starting slot position, which I don't see happening this year. But I could see him being an impactful slot receiver this year. So impactful gadget guy. That's what I meant to say. So, David, before we move to the floors here, just what are your ceilings for the receiving core in general?
I tend to agree with most of what you've said. I think that 700 to 800 yards for Jamison Crowder is maybe a little high, just based on the number of players in this offense. I mean, if we're talking Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, both getting 1,000 yards, which I think is possible. James Cook getting like 500 yards receiving. Whatever Dawson Knox is going to get. However much the other like lower tier receivers on this team, like Khalil Shakir and Isaiah McKenzie, get. We're talking about a lot of yards, and we're talking about like probably close to like 6,000 yards passing for Josh Allen.
That's a lot.
While also maybe getting like, you know, a top 10 rushing. I mean, we're talking about like the greatest offensive performance in a single season ever, and it wouldn't be close.
With the first-year offensive coordinator, they're doing
with a first-year offensive coordinator and a new offensive line coach and a new quarterbacks coach. I don't think that's quite going to happen. But that's sort of the point, right? Like we're talking about ceilings and floors. We're not talking total.
Right, like in this scenario, this is what these guys get. It's like, no, different things are going to happen in order for these ceilings to be hit. But I mean, we see scenarios in which they could happen.
Like when we talked about Zach Moss, like, oh, like maybe he gets like 500 yards rushing, but that might mean that like it's because like he's splitting or rather Singletary only gets like 500 yards rushing because Zach Moss is actually doing well as a runner. You know, so 700 yards. 800 yards would be a big stretch to me. I think it's possible, but I think that would also mean that like maybe Dawson Knox or Khalil Shakir and Gabe Davis aren't performing the way that they want them to, or maybe there's an injury somewhere. So that would be my position on that. I think Jamison Crowder is probably going to be closer to like 500 or 600 yards this year. That would be that's going to be my final answer, Steve.
I think, for floor, like 400 or 500 yards for Jamison Crowder. Again, Diggs, as I said, for floor, 1,000, Davis, 700 to 800. And then for McKenzie, the floor, honestly, is not a game day active, or, you know, just based off of, I think he will be a game day active. I think he'll be the kick returner probably, unless Tavon Austin has this insane preseason. But and I think he will be a gadget player. But again, if we're talking floor, like worst case scenario, what's happening to Isaiah McKenzie? There are paths in which he is not a weekly active. Same with Khalil Shakir. So I think, does that wrap up receivers?
Tavon Austin's floor and ceiling. Ceiling is making the roster as a punt return.
Right, yes. Ceiling is on the roster, which the practice squad rules just got extended, right? Like the Bills can have old dudes on the practice squad. There's nothing better than Buffalo media, man. You don't live in Buffalo, but so the local media, at least the news media, like, you know, cable news or whatever, like Channel 4, Channel 7, those channels, they've been treating the signing of Tavon Austin like this big deal the last couple of days, which I love. And I understand the argument could be made that it's the middle of the offseason. There's nothing really else to talk about. The Bills just signed a player, so talk about it. But it just screams small market to me, where it's like with the Bill, we're making a big deal out of the Bills signing this college dude who was relevant 10 years ago. I love it. I just think it's hilarious. It's like, this team's gonna maybe win the Super Bowl, and we're doing features about Tavon Austin. I love you love to see it. You really do. But
that's right.
Gabe Davis, 1,000-yard receiver, lock it in. Can someone tell me where I can bet on that? Tavon Austin, 0 fumbles on 0 punt returns and 0 kick returns. Austin's floor is punt returner. That's a hot take.
That is a hot take. That means like Marquez Stevenson, you're out the door. Right?
Oh, for sure. I think he's out the door. Anyway, notice we didn't talk about Marquez Stevenson. But, right. No, I think Khalil Shakir, I think the drafting of Khalil Shakir kind of any scenario, or I'll take that back. Most scenarios in which Marquez Stevenson snuck on the roster, eliminated with the drafting of Khalil Shakir, just because I think he has more long-term upside as an offensive contributor than Marquez Stevenson has. So moving on past the receiving core. Tight end. Ceiling for Dawson Knox. So Dawson Knox last year had 587 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. This is going to be bold. I think his ceiling is lower than what he had last year. I think his ceiling is like 500 yards and like 7 or 8 touchdowns. And you might be saying that's ridiculous, Kyle. You know, he just had a better season than that. Why would you say that his ceiling is lower? As has been talked about much before on this and every Cover One podcast, I feel like Ken Dorsey and Aaron Kromer. Ken Dorsey is the more important guy in this scenario, but it come from past offenses in which 2 tight end sets were run at least more frequently than the Bills have ran them under Brian Daboll. And if you look at the numbers, they ran effectively 0 the 2 tight end sets last year, the lowest number of 2 tight end sets in the league. So with the signing of O.J. Howard, that to me and to anyone with a brain indicates that the Bills plan to play more 2 tight end sets than they played last year. Now, again, really any number of 2 tight end sets is a higher number than they played last year, but O.J. Howard is a pretty significant signing in terms of a tight end too. So I think that kind of shows their hand a little bit, unless they just want the best, or, one of the best insurance policies in the NFL for a team with only 1 tight end. If you're only going to really use 1 tight end and you have O.J. Howard as an insurance policy, that's cool. But I think it more so indicates that they are going to play more 2 tight end sets. So to me, that limits Dawson Knox's ceiling at least a little bit. Maybe it doesn't, but I do think that O.J. Howard, I have his ceiling at like 300 to 400 receiving yards. Again, that's like best case scenario, 400 receiving yards for O.J. Howard. And then Dawson Knox. I might be wrong. David, what do you think his ceiling is?
I think I think you're right in that he'll probably have fewer yards. I think his ceiling would be double-digit touchdowns.
That's quite good. That is quite impactful.
I think that he just presents such a unique mismatch in the red zone in particular. And he has improved so much as an actual receiver and as a blocker, but as a receiver, that I just think that he has the trust of Josh Allen. Although, he probably has the trust of most receivers, or most receivers have earned his trust, I would say. He just has a really good connection and chemistry with a lot of people. But like Dawson Knox, I think is somebody that just, like, when you get into the red zone, you think tight ends, like, for the most part, because they present that type of mismatch. And I do think that double-digit touchdowns is definitely a possibility for Dawson Knox, if not an outright probability. I do think O.J. Howard as 300 yards or so, 3 or 4 touchdowns is probably fair and accurate. Again, some of that's going to be dependent on injuries. Both Knox and Howard have dealt with injuries in their careers, so we'll see what happens there. But I do think that 500-ish yards for Dawson Knox and double-digit touchdowns is probably what I think his ceiling would be.
And then for floor, I have Knox. I mean, he was kind of a 300 to 400 receiving yard player in his first 2 years, kind of exploded last year. But for floor, unfortunately, back to that 300 to 400 yard range. And then for O.J. Howard, the floor is like barely play. If they just signed him and they don't play any more 2 tight end sets, I mean, that's O.J. Howard really not on the field. But again, that's floor. I don't see that as the likely scenario. David, the people are accusing you of being high and tired in chat. Can you confirm?
I am tired because, believe it or not, I do work out after work. But also, listen, I am not going to confirm whether or not I have ever actually been in an inebriated state due to marijuana. That being said, if I were high, you would know I was high. We'll just put it that way.
The offensive line, speaking of high, the offensive, that made no sense, but
not at all, but that's okay.
I take that. Oh, Jalen Weidermeyer. The people are asking for Jalen Weidermeyer talk. And will we deliver? I think he's a practice squad guy, Jalen Weidermeyer.
Ceiling is making the practice squad and not screwing up his opportunity.
Right. As I said in not last week, it was a few weeks ago, but I do think the Bills think it's like, I want to say that Jalen Weidermeyer, again, you look at his kind of profile, or at least his couple of months leading up to the draft there, and how he was kind of looked at as this day 2 maybe pick leading up to the draft, and the combine happens and he doesn't do well, and he kind of falls out. And by kind of falls out of the draft, I mean, he does fall out of the draft. The Bills host him on a pre-draft visit and then sign him. I think internally they might think like, okay, we got a nice developmental piece if we're able to sneak him on the practice squad. And they love to do that. The Bills love to just take these guys who no one's heard of. And Jalen Weidermeyer is a guy who people have heard of, but they do love to just take these guys who no one really knows that much about, develop them on the practice squad for 3 or 4 years, and then they become contributors. I mean, look at Justin Zimmer, who just kind of stuck around for a long time, right. And then he was a player who was impactful in the reps that he got. So I do think that Jalen Weidermeyer, ideal scenario, the Bills can keep him on the practice squad. I don't think if they have to use a 53-man roster spot on him, I think they're going to say like, okay, like he'll go elsewhere. It's fine. That's not too big of a loss. But ideal scenario, they get him on the practice squad. Offensive line. Ceiling, I wrote down numerous Pro Bowlers, as you alluded to last week, David. There's a possibility, nay, maybe a probability that the Bills have numerous Pro Bowlers just because on the offensive line, because Deion Dawkins is in the rotation now, and Roger Saffold is kind of a, I don't want to say like a household name when it comes to the offensive line, but Pro Bowl voters, and by that I mean the fans, they know Roger Saffold is a name that football fans know. And when it comes to the offensive line and the people who actually vote for the Pro Bowl, that's kind of what they do when it comes to the offensive line. Right. I know that name. I vote for Roger Saffold. Right. He has to be good. I think they could have multiple Pro Bowlers across the offensive line and just improved play in general, given the upgrade on the coaching staff. I don't want to, this isn't necessarily an anti-Bobby Johnson podcast, right? I have nothing personally against Bobby Johnson. He could kick my ass, I'm sure. But Aaron Kromer is probably the better coach, and I think I would rather have Aaron Kromer as the offensive line coach on my football team than I would Bobby Johnson. Yeah. So is that a hot take?
No, not at all. Like, look, even if you liked Bobby Johnson as an offensive line coach, what's a good way of putting this? You can have a pretty nice steak. You have a nice steak in front of you. You enjoy it. You seasoned it up. You grilled it. You did a good job. Good for you. Then there's like top tier level, like you cannot believe that somebody actually made this and was a human and exists on this earth type of steak. And you're like, this is the difference between like Bobby Johnson and Aaron Kromer. Like Bobby Johnson was kind of handed a lot of different challenges, especially throughout this season, where there was just seemed to be a constant shuffling of the offensive line. And overall, especially down the stretch, they managed to figure it out. And I think that's fine. That's good. And credit to him for doing that. He was the one who developed Ryan Bates. I mean, they kept him on that practice squad for years, and he kept working with him, and lo and behold, it turns out he's a pretty decent player.
Ryan Bates is another great example of the Jalen Weidermeyer thing I was just talking about.
Yeah. But like Aaron Kromer is one of the best offensive line coaches, period. Like that exists on this planet Earth. It's not necessarily taking a shot at Bobby Johnson to say that Aaron Kromer is better.
So it's ceiling. Is ceiling just, improved play all around, given the new coaching staff, given the new scheme?
I think that, it's very possible that like I said in our previous podcast about what did we tile that? Like just big predictions,
bold predictions,
of course. God.
Which the Air Raid Hour is doing their version. I don't want to say their version of. They are doing more bold predictions.
No, it's their version. We came up with it. It's their version.
Bold predictions is an entirely unique concept that we came up with last week, and we were the first ones that
nobody else did. It's just I think that the ceiling is multiple Pro Bowlers. The floor is, oh my God, what the hell happened?
Do you
We're
think that's
just,
the floor?
yeah, whether it's injuries or whether it's just like, Dawkins taking a step back, or whatever the case might be. Offensive lines can go to crap real quick, even with good offensive line coaches.
See, I was going to say the floor is like, I wrote down the floor is just looking for answers, right? The floor is like, I mean, we saw what a bad offensive line looks like for portions of last year, but like they made upgrades, right? So like you would think with Saffold, and they've seemingly figured out right guard with Bates, you would think, I think that's where Bates is going to play, but so you would think that like the floor would be even like the same level of caliber, if not a slight upgrade over last year.
Potentially.
In theory, right? That would be the floor.
In theory.
Theoretically. And that's all I wanted to vote about the offensive line here, because we're an hour deep. Moving on to the defensive line, and then we'll kind of steam through the rest of them, because I mean, what else? Defensive line is really the last significant position group we have to talk about, or at least the position group with the most offseason changes that we will have to discuss here. So for the ceiling for the defensive line, I have, just an improved unit from last year, because I feel like they got a lot of unnecessary hate last year because the sack numbers weren't bad, but just kind of underwhelming, kind of left a lot of meat on the bone. And so for me, the ceiling would be more consistent against the run with more pass rushing upside. Again, getting that through Von Miller, and then Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, just more consistent pass rushing. They brought in guys who are or at least more in better positions to be finishers than they've had in the past. And then when it comes to the run, again, Greg Rousseau was a very good run defender last year. Him coming back in year two, a very good run defender as a rookie. And let's see what he can do in year two. Hopefully, maintain, if not improve. And then Shaq Lawson coming back, again, already a good run defender, or he was a good run defender here, and he statistically improved as a run defender while he was gone. So him coming back, I do think you're going to get more consistency against the run. And then, like I said, more pass rushing upside. I've talked about Mike Clay before in his statistical projections for the Bills. He has Von Miller coming in at 10.5 sacks, and he has 5 apiece from Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau. He has the defensive line combining for 35 total sacks. For comparison, last year, the Bills defensive line combined for 29.5 sacks. So for me, that seems like a relatively fair ceiling, right? Just better against the run, more consistent against the run, and then 35 combined sacks.
Yeah. I mean, especially between those couple of players, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think we do expect double-digit sacks from Von Miller at least. Greg Rousseau, maybe not double-digit sacks. Probably closer into that like 5 to 8 sack range, which would be great.
If he gets 8 sacks, that's a great year from Greg Rousseau.
Yeah, especially given how good he is as a run defender, I would definitely be into that. And Ed Oliver, I mean, we love Ed Oliver here. Ed Oliver is good, as we know. I think that I think that Ed Oliver has potential to get like into that 7 or 8 sack range, if not maybe double digits. Don't quote me on that. But I think it's possible. But I think 5 minimum for Ed Oliver is more likely. Outside of that, and then you get cleanup sacks from guys like Boogie or a bunch of other players who are on this team, right? Shaq Lawson, our edge 3, right?
Right, definitely. Yeah. If you ask me. I feel bad because I don't even dislike AJ Epps. I've just never said a positive thing about the man.
It's just,
and I don't dislike him.
But it's like, what are we supposed to say? He hasn't done anything. Like,
he's been underwhelming, unfortunately.
Underwhelming is right.
And then who wrote here? Not enough, need 40 plus. Mike Clay projects. Where is it? I wrote it down. 40. I didn't write it down. I'm an idiot. He projects him to finish with 44, which would be third in the league total. 35 from the defensive line. That's, again, I think 35. I'm going to give you guys some numbers. David, I'm going to give you some numbers and then chat as well. I'm going to give you some over-unders. You guys tell me if the players who I mentioned, if they're getting over or under the number that I propose is the word that I'm looking for. Von Miller, 9.5 sacks, over or under?
Over.
Ed Oliver, 5.5 sacks, over or under?
Over.
Greg Rousseau, 5.5 sacks, over or under?
Push.
What does that mean?
Someone doesn't gamble.
No, not at all. I just thought it sounded cool.
No, it's just it's like that is probably accurate. 5.5 sacks.
Can you do that? Can you just say no? If someone gives you an over under, could you just say no? That's right.
Pretty much. That's what push means.
I love it. I didn't know you could do that. That's great. Over or under 5.5? No, you're right. Like, who else? What other players are on the Shaq Lawson? 3.5.
Over. But only by like a half sack. I think you could get 4 sacks.
Bold one. This one could come back to bite you. Jordan Phillips, 4.5. Under. He had double digit last time he was here.
He had 3 sacks against the Titans, and they were all cleanup sacks.
That
was basically his entire. But there's other guys that are going to get cleanup sacks.
And the Bills
like Rousseau and Basham.
Rousseau's getting 9 easy.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
That's crazy. Rousseau 9. I would be happy with it. But what's happening with Von Miller in that scenario? What's happening with Ed Oliver? Again, like I think 35 is a good number. It's just going to be who makes up that 35.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're looking at 10 for Von easy. If Rousseau, again, they play different positions, but just numbers, just how the numbers add up. If Rousseau gets 9, Oliver's not pushing double digits.
Yeah.
I
would probably agree.
I mean, maybe the Bills are breaking sack records this year. I mean, that'd be incredible. I just don't foresee it happening.
Yeah.
The floor, even for the floor, I wrote down like at least 30, right? Again, as I said, last year, the Bills defensive line combined for 29.5 sacks. I think even the floor is you're looking at a better pass rushing unit because, again, like I said, the Bills brought in guys who are in better position to finish, right? They brought in guys, they retooled the defensive line to give it more pass rushing upside and thus a higher pass rushing floor. Guys, like I said, in better position to finish, and thus I think at least 30 sacks for the defensive line. I think that's a good floor, a floor that a lot of people would even be happy with, but I think it's has potential to be higher, 5 higher at least. Like I said, I didn't give it much margin between ceiling and floor, but again, I think it's a new line, but you kind of know what you're going to get from it. You know what it's designed to do.
Right, I would agree with that.
Linebackers. David, this is an interesting one because
it is.
Do you want to? I'll hand it to you. What do you have to say about the linebacker group?
So Tremaine Edmonds, obviously the least controversial player on this team right now. Quick question: why didn't we include him in the defensive line conversation? Isn't he at edge now?
I thought
Tremaine
about it.
Edmonds.
Yeah, no, I thought about having him in the edge conversation, and his over under for sack would have been 15, obviously.
Because that's where he needs to be.
Right, he is just this. He is Bruce Smith reincarnated, just waiting to be released. Or you just got to release him.
But anyway, on to the actual thoughts about linebacker. So, Jermaine Edmonds, I think that he we've talked about this before. He is not as great as his best supporters think. He is not as bad as his biggest detractors think. The truth is somewhere in the middle with him. It's certainly possible that he takes a step forward. And, we've been waiting for him to take that step forward since he had his rookie year. And, we all know the same reasonings. He's this super athlete. He's still super young. It can still come together, and it can. And I think the thing, he's in the final year of his contract. It is a put up or shut up type of year for him. And given the state of the defensive line in front of him, especially with the addition of Daquan Jones, if he does not, in fact, put up, then all right, we'll see you later. Thanks for coming, but have someone else pay you a crap load of money. And I really do think that there is still a distinct possibility that he takes that step forward this year. I would love to see that happen. A lot of it really is just about finding consistency and making a few more impact plays that you see on the stat sheet. But we've kind of talked about Tremaine Edmonds to death. With Milano, I mean, first priority, stay healthy, protect those hamstrings.
Get new hamstrings,
Get new hamstrings.
Can you do that?
Probably not.
Well, I don't have any doctor friends. This is why everyone needs a doctor friend.
just a text for your podcast about football. It's like, hey, there's this player we all love, but he keeps getting his hamstrings hurt. Is it possible for him?
Can you get new hamstrings? Are there any doctors in chat? Do they have a hamstring replacement surgery?
Hamstring replacement. Okay, so I think it's called hamstring avulsion. It's a serious injury that may require surgery. During the tendon avulsion repair, hamstring muscles are pulled back to its normal attachment. I'm going to stop reading this. This sounds awful. We're not discussing. This doesn't
sound like he can get new ones. He can have mine. He has more use for him than I do. It's serious. He certainly does, right? My hamstrings don't bring happiness to an entire region. And if they did, I would be well paid for it, right? You guys can't see my hamstrings on the podcast. If that's what needs to happen, I'll start showing the hammies out here. But no.
Cover one roundup after hours.
Hamstring edition.
We'll link to your OnlyFans.
Right, yeah. It's just my hamstrings. For the floor, this is one of those position groups where it's like the floor is more of the same, right? Like, I don't want to say either of them. I don't think Matt Milano's underperformed because he was a 5th round pick, right? So anyone who expected him to be better than he currently is, they're lying to you. They're dirty liars, and they shouldn't be in your life. Get them out of your life if they're lying to you about this. But so Matt Milano hasn't underperformed, but I'd listen to the argument that Tremaine Edmonds has underperformed or hasn't necessarily lived up to expectations. Yeah. So for me, the floor is, they're just kind of the same players that they've been for the last 4 years, which is upsetting, which it would be kind of underwhelming, especially given, like we've said, that the improvements that they've made to the defensive line, these guys should be getting more pressure on the quarterback, should be opening up more lanes, should be putting these linebackers in more of a position to make plays, make impactful plays. If we just get more of the same, then it's like, that's gross. That's the floor. The ceiling is you do see both of these guys, particularly Edmonds, you see them starting to make more impact plays. To go back to Mike Clay's projections, he had 1.5 sacks and 1 interception for Edmonds and like 100 and something tackles. If that's the season we get out of Edmonds, I think it's see you later. I think the Bills put him in more of a position to make more plays than 1.5 sacks and 1 interception this year. And if that's what they get out of him, it's like, we could probably maybe not get better, but we can get better value. We're not going to pay you to continue to do that.
Sure.
And then for Milano, Mike Clay projected 2.5 sacks and 1 interception, which maybe a pick. See, Milano's always around the ball though. So maybe he only gets 1 pick, but he'll also have 2 fumble recoveries and 1 forced fumble.
And part of that really is just the positions that they play, right? It is more difficult for Edmonds to be a Mike linebacker because you are taking on more blocks. You have more responsibilities just going from sideline to sideline because you're operating right in that middle. Whereas Milano is just like, you're running and chasing, you're the one coming in afterwards. And because he's usually just so disciplined about like trying to punch the ball out or rake it out, or, because he's so fast, he's always around the ball if it comes out. That's where you get a lot of those big plays from him. But, if you put Milano at Mike linebacker, I mean, my God, he would be bad. He would be atrocious, honestly.
Right.
He would, like if you think Tremaine Edmonds is bad at taking on blocks consistently, putting in Matt Milano, who's what, 230, right? Like 6'1", 230.
Something like that.
In the middle of the defense.
We'll see what he measures in at, but
that would be rough to watch. So it is just partly based on the position that he plays. Should we talk about Terrell Bernard and what he may or may not contribute at all this year?
If you have anything to say about Terrell Bernard, you got to speak your piece.
Listen, if you don't, then I don't, honestly.
I personally don't see
we have 40 minutes until Air Raid Hour comes on, and we've got,
and I have 50 minutes worth of content about Terrell Bernard. Right. But no, we just got to push that for a future.
The most interesting part is I think coming up. So let's get into the corners, because I mean this was the biggest clear position of need coming into the offseason, in my personal opinion. Whether or not now there's a lot of people who probably felt that way for a while, that like they really need to get a legitimate CB2. And they never did. And now they do. Now they have Kaiir Elam. Unfortunately, part of that was probably because they felt like they needed to get someone really legitimate in case Tre'Davious White is not 100% to go to start the season. Behind that, you also have Dane Jackson as an outside corner, and then you also have who was the other guy that they drafted from Villanova, whose name is escaping me right now.
You gave me Benford,
yeah,
Christian,
right,
one of those, either
something
an
like
N
that.
or a D. I'm playing Wordle now. I think it's Christian Benford. If I had to guess, if I were a betting man, if I were making a bet on Underdog Fantasy, it's Christian Benford.
Christian Benford. There we go. Wait, I literally have it written right here when we talked about the draft class last week or last month, whatever.
Right. The days, they're all the same at this time. Time is relative.
So, it's good to have, first of all, let's be clear. It's good to have Dane Jackson as a potential number 3 corner, right? Like having Tre'Davious White and Kaiir Elam as your 1 and 2, I'm all for that. The problem is Dane Jackson is probably going to be your number 2 corner to start the season, and Kaiir Elam is going to be your number 1 corner. Having a rookie as your number 1 corner, it's a bit tricky. It's a bit of a roll of the dice, but the last time the Bills did that, it was Tre'Davious White, and he was amazing. And by like the middle of the season, teams were like, yeah, we're not going to throw at Tre'Davious White anymore. we're not going to do that. And again, like as I've said, pretty much since Sean McDermott has gotten here, the one thing we can always count on is him coaching up defensive backs. You've seen it with Trey White, who a lot of people liked coming out of the draft. I don't think anybody had like, this dude's going to be top tier, legit number 1 type of cornerback who's going to lock down receivers week to week. With Dane Jackson, I mean, Dane Jackson was a 7th round pick, and he had to fill in after Tre'Davious White got hurt. Played pretty well. I mean, again, like he wasn't like spectacular. It's not like he was jumping routes and getting a bunch of picks or anything like that, but he wasn't like blowing assignment after assignment. He was where he was supposed to be and doing what he was supposed to do. It never felt like Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace, for that matter, were just like completely lost and confused, or the reason why the Bills were going to lose a game. And then with, the depth that you have, relatively speaking, with Saron Neal and Christian Benford, who knows? I mean, we kind of know what Saron Neal is. He's just this, special teams ace that they kind of use in particular situations on defense. And Christian Benford, we'll see. We'll see what happens with him. He might be an interesting one to watch during like the preseason, honestly. Mm-hmm. Might be a guy to really focus on. But we should also talk about Teron Johnson, also nickel corner I mean, like top 3 nickel corner in the NFL at least. The dude is just an animal. I mean, like he is so good in run defense, like way better than any nickel cornerback should be. And like they ask a lot of him in run defense because they play nickel so much. And he sticks his head in there. He so freaking physical. And it's kind of why he's gotten hurt, because he's also smaller, and like guys of his size probably shouldn't be as physical as he actually is. But you know, what are you gonna do? Tell him to not be physical in the game of football? Like, come on. Like Daquan Jones was quoted like this past week. You know, run defense is mental. You know, you got and Teron Johnson has that mentality. That's for sure.
Bulldog got that dog in him.
I
love it. That's my favorite footballism.
And he's been great as a coverage corner as well. I mean, it is not easy to be a nickel corner in today's NFL from a coverage perspective, and he has done a phenomenal job. And it's why they gave him a big contract, or relatively big contract. You know, nickel corners don't get quite as much money as the boundary corners, and I think we're going to see that sort of come to a head with Kenny Moore in Indianapolis, but that's a whole other thing. I do think this is a really good group, and when Tre'Davious White comes back, it will be a great group. Tre'Davious White's your number one corner is always great. Having Kyer Elam with his athleticism and his intelligence with this coaching staff, you could be looking at like a really, really great pair of quarterbacks for this team, and having Teron Johnson as your nickel back. I mean, that's pretty great.
And that's why it's hard to put a definitive ceiling and floor on it, which is why I'm not going to do it, because so much of it depends on when Trey White is going to be back and in the lineup. Because again, if you're going out week 1 with a boundary and nickel trio of Tre'Davious White, Kyer Elam, and Taron Johnson, that's great, right? That is an incredible starting cornerback trio, if you will. But if you're going out week 1 or week 4, or, you know, you're going deeper into the season with Kyer Elam, Dane Jackson, and Taron Johnson, then I'm a little more suspect. I'm a little more worried about that long-term stability of the group. Again, none of them, they won't ever be like overly exposed, because you have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer back there, which we will get into here in a second. And, you know, they'll be, if it's Jackson and Elam starting at 1-2, or, you know, 2-1, I guess, respectively, whatever. But given, you know, if it is those two, I don't think they'll do as many creative things with getting Poyer in the box or whatever, or, you know, kind of rotating them back there. I think they'll kind of keep, you know, Poyer and Hyde behind them to kind of mitigate any risk. But if it is Tre'Davious White starting week 1 or week 3 or week 4, you get him back relatively early in the season and you're able to go with Tre'Davious White and Kyer Elam, then your ceiling is like elite secondary, which, I mean, that is their ceiling anyway, probably. If Tre'Davious White misses significant time, I wouldn't say their ceiling is significant is elite secondary. But if White plays most of the season, the ceiling is best secondary in the league. So we'll just transition here into safeties. For that, I have the ceiling and the floor is the same thing, and that's just best safety tandem in the league, because that's exactly what they've been the whole time they've been here. Hyde and Poyer. It'd be silly to say anything else. Yeah,
I mean, like, they're so good. They're phenomenal. They're amazing. What more can you ask of these dudes other than pay Jordan Poyer? I mean, that's the ceiling, right? Jordan Poyer gets the bag again. I think that this would be they're just good. They're just great. They're great.
They're good football players.
What is there to say? They're great football players, and that's what you love to see. You love to see it.
David, do you have any interest in talking about the special teams unit, or no?
Tyler Bass is amazing. We pray to our wonderful kicking deity, Punt God, that he will learn how to hold and do it well.
Yes, ceiling is most electric unit in the league.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then Reed Ferguson is just kind of there. He does his job. Good for him.
With his great snaps. All right, we're moving on. We're an hour and a half deep, but you know we have time. We have a half an hour. We're moving on to the segment that I gave a name. I said last week. Again, this segment was beloved last week. This is what the people are tuning in for. It's not for the Buffalo Bills talk. It's for this talk. It's time for the new segment. This is the Bills podcast you're looking for. This is where we talk about Obi-Wan.
You did not want that graphic up there long.
Well, it's supposed to just be like, the hand wave, right? Where it's like, no, quickly. It's like, people are tuning in, they come in now and they're like, what are they talking about? Obi-Wan Kenobi? What's going on?
We spent an hour and a half talking about football.
And then you just hit him with the
off-season.
You hit him with, this is the Bills podcast you're looking for. Obi-Wan episode 4 came out last week, David, and people don't like it. Like,
I thought it was fine. It was
a perfectly bad episode.
It was like, of the 4, it's probably my least favorite. A lot of it is similar to what takes place at the end of the video game Jedi Fallen Order, which was released about 2.5 years ago. And it's a great game, and that particular ending is amazing. But it was fine. It was fine. I don't think there was any big issue that I had with it, other than just being a little similar, and that was pretty much it. But I am looking. It's crazy. It's crazy that we are 4 episodes into the show, and we only have 2 left.
Twitter told me the show's bad, David. It's a bad show.
Twitter, as it often is dumb and wrong. So I don't know what to tell you other than just form your own opinion on stuff. Speaking of which, not really, but I recently, as a known George Lucas apologist, I decided to finally go back and watch his very first film that he ever made.
Oh, the letter, number.
THX 1138.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. So this is, if you go on Amazon and you have Amazon Prime and you buy the director's cut of THX 1138, it is 88 minutes long. Not a long movie. That thing is a trip. It is Lucas made this originally as his student film. It won a bunch of awards when he was a student going to various festivals. He was the prodigy child of USC and their film school. And it's what drew the attention of Francis Ford Coppola, and why he decided to take him under his wing and get him to actually make movies. And it kind of feels like one night George Lucas was upset at the state of the world, very relatable.
As one is,
did a bunch of acid, and just decided, oh my gosh, I have a great idea for a movie.
That sounds like a great idea, just in general, for anyone to do.
There's it's honestly really hard to describe, other than just I actually watched a short little documentary after I watched it that included George Lucas and some other people who worked on it. And he basically described it as it's a science fiction movie, but it's not in the future. It's not supposed to be a criticism of the of what the future is. It's a criticism of how we live life now. And it's really interesting, and the ending is really, really powerful. It's the most bizarre, avant-garde, because he was very influenced by the avant-garde filmmaking scene of the San Francisco area, and you can clearly see that in this film. He kind of came up as he originally wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. Eventually he kind of made this student film, and it got all this attention, and his style really is that in this movie in particular, he wanted to make a documentary type of film, but without but not doing shaky cam sort of stuff, and instead of and choosing to do more grounded, more stable, Japanese inspired film making ideas and camera work from Kurosawa, because everyone does something and is inspired by Kurosawa in some way. But yeah, it's super interesting, and it's something that I want to rewatch, and especially since it's less than an hour and a half, it's very easy to just get back into it. But it's something that you really need to pay attention to the screen, because if you're just oh, I can follow along with like the dialogue. It's like, no, you can't. No, you can't. It's like, in fact, one of the, when Francis Ford Coppola brought him on to his production company, American Zoetrope, he was like, okay, I want to make your student film into like a full length feature film. So I'm just like, why don't you go write a screenplay and a script for this? And he was like, Francis, I can't write a script. And he was like, just look, if you want to be a good director, you're going to have to write a script. If you want to make the movies that you want to make, you're going to have to write the scripts. And so he went out, he wrote the script, he gave it to Francis, and he was like, and Francis was just like, man, you're right. You can't write a screenplay.
It's trash, dude.
It's just really funny. But it's a very, as Lucas has been throughout his whole career, it's very visually rich. It's very visual. Don't focus too much on what the characters are necessarily saying, so much as what the images are telling you. And just sort of, it's a good way to force yourself to develop some visual language. And it's always interesting to go back to like a director's original like ideas and where they came up and how they came up, and like it's so funny going from Lucas's first film being this super trippy avant-garde, very intensely visual film, to American Graffiti, which is a fun look at cruising in the 60s, which is what he did. It's very personal to him, and it's very funny. And to then this ginormous like space fantasy opera that ends up dominating the world for the next 50 years or so.
Yeah.
It's just it's such a strange set of movies to start your career with, because they're not in so many ways they're very different from each other, but in so many ways they're just like, yeah, it's totally a George Lucas movie. Like, and I think that's part of what I admire about George Lucas, is that he makes George Lucas movies, and there's no doubt of that at all. You don't watch a George Lucas movie and you're like, oh, well, this is kind of like a Steven Spielberg movie or a Coppola movie. It's like, no, they're not. It's like, this is a George Lucas movie through and through, and
George Lucas joint.
That's right. Anyway, that's enough of that.
To think it all culminated with a bad Obi-Wan show. Disgusting. No, that wraps it up. I don't think we're gonna have time to talk about the Star Wars. That's what it is. That's what the thing's called. I don't think we're gonna have time to talk about Star Wars next week, because it's the as I said at the top of the show,
right.
It's the playoff drought retrospective with guests. So I could see that show pushing right up against 9 o'clock. Even if it were just you and I, it would be a little too long. But if we're going to be getting people in there, I feel like it's going to be a race against the clock. I don't know if we're necessarily going to have time to talk about Obi-Wan, but we'll 2 weeks again. As the people, this is becoming one of the biggest Star Wars podcasts in the world. I've checked the numbers. Right. There aren't many, just like there aren't enough Buffalo Bills podcasts, there certainly aren't enough Star Wars podcasts.
Definitely not, and definitely not enough with some weird, clever title to some random bit or piece of trivia about Star Wars. Definitely not.
Right. So just as we are the People's Bills podcast and we have taken over that game entirely, we are very quickly taking over the Star Wars podcasting game as well. So 2 weeks, you'll have our thoughts on the Obi-Wan. It should be the finale at that point, right?
2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll know how it ends, right? We'll know if Obi-Wan lives or dies. I guess we'll never know, but, so yeah, make sure to tune in next week, though. As I said, playoff retrospective, special guest Victoria from the Tuck Rule, maybe some Cover One personalities. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel and the Cover One podcast feeds on iTunes. Leave reviews, please. Consider subscribing to the Cover One Premium. There you will have access to the Cover One Premium Slack, where you can discuss a wide variety of topics with a wide variety of people, including your favorite Cover One podcast hosts, such as Greg and Aaron and all the other guys. We have a lot of podcasts, David. I don't know if you knew this. We have a lot of podcasts here on the channel, all of which are great, and you can get them all, again, by subscribing to the podcast feeds and the YouTube channel. Make sure to follow Cover One on Twitter at Cover One and on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram at some variation of at Cover One. I think I got all the tags in. I think that was big. Make sure to follow David on Twitter
at DFAUXY at DFoxy. You can find some very lukewarm and boring takes that are inconsistently tweeted out throughout the week. So
you can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi. Thank you all for watching. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.